All right, so if I think there seems to be quite a lot of people joining and they're all joined in, so we'll get started. Um, so everyone, Sophie's going to talk today about the new legislative changes. There's going to be some Q&A at the end. If you like, drop your questions into the chat box. We might address them as we go, or we'll address them at the end. And I'll just spotlight Soph now, so she's got the floor. Are you ready, Soph?
Indeed.
Okay, there you go. So hopefully everyone can see Sophie's slides. If you can't, just let me know in the chat box. And over to you, Soph.
Okay, so we just wait 2 seconds. I just want to make sure that everyone can see the slides. So if you can't see them, please do just drop something in the chat and we'll rectify that immediately. There's nothing in the chat, so I'm hoping that's so good. Okay, all right, let's roll. So, hi, as Michelle said, my name is Sophie. I am from Real Plus, and it is always my great thrill to spend an hour to an hour and a half talking about Victorian legislation. So this is an opportunity for us to go through a little bit of a refresh on some of the minimum standards that came through a little while ago, and just going back over a few of those things to make sure we're all completely across them. Then we're going to start talking about the new changes that came through that actually dropped on the 5th of March 2025, and talking about what they're actually going to be, how they're going to impact you and your owners or your residential rental providers, beg your pardon. I am old school, so I'm going to say tenants and I'm going to say owners and I'm going to say landlords. So if you can just in your heads insert renter and residential rental provider, that would be amazing. And there is, as Michelle said, the opportunity for you to drop any feedback or any questions into the chat. I will do my best to answer the questions as I go or at the end of the session in the Q&A. If you throw me any super curly ones that I can't answer today, and I have to go away and do a bit of research for you, I will absolutely come back to you. The other thing to remember is we do have a session in June, which is going to be a workshop around the implementation of these changes. So as you're going over the next month or so, if things come up within your organisation, you're talking about them, you're not quite sure how to deal with them, or you need a little bit of guidance, by all means, just write those things down and bring them along with you to the workshop. Because I can guarantee you, if you're thinking about it, someone else is thinking about it, or if they haven't come across it yet, they're about to. So absolutely going through all of those bits and pieces and bringing them with you is going to help everybody in the long term as well. So now that we've got that all clarified, I think the best thing for us to do is just to launch straight into Legislation Tuesday. So if my slides would be lovely and actually move along, then that would be good. Okay. All right, so as I said, today is a bit of a refresher of the minimum standards, the new addition to the minimum standards, which is only one, so it'll take us literally 37 seconds to get past that one. The new legislation and also what's expected in the future. So back in 2021 was when the original changes to the minimum standards came in, or the introduction. I can speak. I will get my tongue into gear in a moment. The residential tenancies regulations came in. Now, this was where we found all of the practical how-to of the changes to the Residential Tenancies Act. This had all the detail in it. So if you don't have a copy of the reg organisation right now, there's a QR code there for you to actually grab that, and either to save it on your desktop, or if you want to go old school and do things like highlight and put post-its, which I fully confess I still do, you can absolutely print one of these off and have it floating around in your office as well. There is a bit of binding involved, so see how you go with that. And then this is the regulation, this is the amendment from 2024. So again, QR code there for you to download that one as well. That just, again, gives you a little bit of the reinforcement and the explanations around the implementation of the changes to the Act. Okay, so the minimum standards first came in, as we all know, on the 29th of March 2021. There was 14 minimum standards. And I know that we are all very across them, and we know that we're using them inside out every single day. But I'm just going to go through these, just as I said, a little bit of a refresher, and perhaps just capturing a few things that perhaps people were aware of back in 2021, but it's become so normalized for you now that you stop thinking about these things. We have to be really careful with minimum standards, because if we slip up on those and we actually lease a property out without it actually meeting minimum standards, there is implications for our clients. So we do want to be very across that. So the first one we're going to talk about is obviously locks. Now, the most important thing with the locks to remember is that under the legislation, it does state that the lock must be able to be opened with or without a key. So the lock on the left with the little green smiley face, that one is able to be used, and that is compliant. The one over on the right would not be compliant, simply because you have to use a key for that particular lock. So if these locks are in your in your properties right now, as part of your minimum standards and your routine inspections, these things should be rectified. So just keep an eye out for those on external doors. Then we're looking at bathroom facilities. So the bathroom facilities are a reasonable supply of hot and cold water. Does anyone actually know, just drop it in the chat if you do, what is considered a reasonable supply of hot and cold water? Does anyone want to have a stab at it? Everyone's so quiet this morning. Anyone want to have a go? Is the group chat working okay, Michelle? Should be.
I'll just try it. I'll just drop a test in there. So that
Test. There we go. It is working. So no one wants to no one wants to even have a stab at what a reasonable supply of hot and cold water is. No? Anyone? Anyone? Last chance. There are chocolate frogs on offer. Throw something in there. Okay. So a reasonable supply of hot and cold water is, ta-da, 50 litres of hot water per day. So cold water obviously is on tap. You don't necessarily need to worry about the amount of cold water that's provided, but it is 50 litres is considered a reasonable supply, and that's per person. So in those older style properties that you might have, it had the teeny tiny little hot water services that sat underneath the bench in the kitchen, for example. And I'm so showing my age by talking about those. They are probably right on the border of being compliant. I would argue that they're probably not. If you have continuous supply hot water services, the instantaneous ones, you're not going to have a problem. Now, the hot and cold water needs to go to the wash basin, the shower, and or the bath, if there is a bath there. And then we're also talking about shower heads. So you have a 3-star water efficiency labelling and standard, so that's WELS, which means that a product must use between 7.5 and 9 litres of water a minute. So that's reasonably easy to test if you really wanted to. I can't say that I have heard of anybody being dragged through tribunal for minimum standards because the showerhead didn't meet legislation, but it is always a possibility. So just be very aware of those hot water services and also your shower heads. Then we've got the very lovely vermin-proof bins. So the reason that there's 4 there is I'm sure most people are aware that the council, Victorian government, I should say, is bringing in another bin. So that's going to be your purple one, which is going to be specifically for your glass containers. Now, this is going to be a bit of an issue, I think, for some properties because not a lot of properties actually have sufficient room to have 4 bins. A lot of them are struggling with 3. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out, I think. But it's coming for us, so we're just going to have to deal with it. But we've got a little bit of time. It's not coming in until 2030. Okay, so again, this is a bit of a quiz for you. There's a photo on the screen right now of an outdoor toilet. Who can tell me whether that is actually compliant or not? Do we think it's compliant? Do we think that meets minimum standards? Don't be concerned about throwing your comments up in the chat. It's an opportunity. If we were sitting in a room, we'd be talking about this. So it's absolutely no different. Definitely got good ventilation. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you for playing at home. I appreciate that. Anybody else want to have a stab as to whether this is actually compliant or not? So if we think about the wording of the actual legislation, what it says is that it must be a structure or a room that provides privacy when utilising the toilet facilities. So under the legislation, this actually is compliant. It is a structure. It does provide privacy. So, if you're at a property and you're looking at and that's the only bathroom that they've got, you can actually put a tick next to that for minimum standards. Bizarre, I know, but the way that the legislation is written, that's the way that it's saying. So here's the next question. Therefore, is this compliant? It's lovely and someone has spent an awful lot of money in renovating this particular property, but is it actually compliant under the Act? O'Brien Real Estate Blackburn, you are spot on. No, it is not compliant because the toilet does not have a separate room. It's not providing privacy. So whilst this is lovely and architecturally, I'm sure the architect had a lot of fun in designing it, I have no idea why you would actually want a bathroom like that in your bedroom. But if you do, this is actually not compliant. So this is a conversation you would need to have with your owner, who no doubt thinks that their property is very lovely. And obviously they have a close relationship with whoever they live with. Okay, so here we are again with another question around compliance. So we've got 2 separate kitchens here. Both of them are lovely. Are they compliant? And if they're not compliant, why? Hello, O'Brien Sydenham. Thank you for joining. Are these kitchens compliant? Come on, I've had Bairnsdale, Blackburn. Okay, here we go. Bairnsdale, no stove on the right. Megan, Is it Megan Cottis? Megan, chocolate frog. Absolute chocolate frog for you. You are 100% correct. So as Megan just pointed out, the kitchen on the left doesn't have a food preparation area, which is a requirement. Designated food preparation area, there really isn't one in the kitchen on the left. The kitchen on the right doesn't have an actual cooktop. So it's got a microwave there, but it doesn't have a separate cooktop, which again is a requirement under the legislation. So these are the fine-tuning kind of things that, unfortunately, again, owners spend a lot of money renovating their properties and then they want to put it onto the rental market, and we're the ones who have to tell them that their beautiful architecture actually doesn't work. Okay. Oops. Excited then. All right, so one of the other expectations of minimum standards or requirements is lighting. So it has to have sufficient natural light appropriate to the function of the room. So if you were looking at the property, the room on the left-hand side, would you say that it has sufficient natural light appropriate to the function of that room? Let's say you could say that was either a lounge room or a bedroom. So in a lounge room, you would normally like to sit down, maybe read a book. Remember books? They were, you might want to read a book. You might want to write something down. You might want to, knit. Who knows? But do you actually think that the lighting in that room is sufficient to be able to do those things? And then on the right-hand side, we've got an example of some architecture that was around a little while ago. Now, apparently, it's no longer approved by council. It's no longer approved under the building regs, but they were called saddlebag bedrooms. So they had referred light. So as you can see, the light is quite a long way away and down quite a long sort of corridor tunnel type thing. And that was what was the expectation of being able to provide reasonable light into those bedrooms. It really didn't provide a great deal of light. So again, natural light appropriate to the function of the room. If you have to turn the light on every time you walk into the room just to be able to not trip over your bed or find something in your bedside drawer, then the natural light is not going to be appropriate for the function of the room. So again, unfortunately, you're going to be looking at those and saying that they are non-compliant. Oh, Olga, good question. Where do we stand if there was natural light in a property, then a double story is built, reducing natural light? Double story next door, I'm assuming. Is that what's actually reducing the natural light? Yes, next door. Okay. So if you've still got windows along the exterior of the property that are providing as much natural light as you can possibly get because there's been a building next door, normally I think it's about 7 metres. There should be a 7-metre clearance from one property to the other, and that is deemed appropriate for light sources. I would probably say that it would be compliant because it's something that the owner doesn't have any control over. Whereas with these kind of things, the owner does have some control over these because they own the property that is causing this. If you have something that is being built next door, that's obviously outside of the owner's control. So I think you could probably formulate a reasonable argument around that. I hope that helps. Okay, then we've got window coverings, which have to provide reasonable privacy and light blocking. So the room on the left-hand side, reasonable privacy and light blocking, absolutely, that would be compliant. The one on the right-hand side, however, reasonable privacy, yes, people can't really see in through those, but light blocking, it's not blocking out sufficient light for people to be able to utilise that room as a lounge or a bedroom. And it is also, the legislation says that it is rooms that are reasonably expected to be utilised as a lounge or a bedroom. So you could even probably get caught under this in the dining room. The dining room actually could be closed off and used as a bedroom. You might find that this was an area that the tenants could argue, see, there I go, tenants, not renters, they could argue that those window coverings were not sufficient. Windows, I think we're all 100% across the windows. The windows have to be able to stay open. If they are open partially or fully, they have to be able to stay open. So if you've got a window that you lift up and it slams straight back down again, or someone says to you, oh, it's fine, just, chock it open with, a bit of dowel or a bit of timber that we provided, that's not compliant. It has to stay open wherever the tenant decides that they want to open that window to. And a secure latch. Now, this was a bit of an interesting one because the terminology used is latch. So something like what we've got there in the photo actually would be compliant. Now, it's compliant minimum standards, but whether it would be compliant from an insurance perspective or not, that's where you probably have to have the conversation with your owners and just, make sure that they are aware that the property may not, it might impact the tenant's insurance, but that's not actually up to the owner, is it? So just something to be aware of. And then we've got heating. So as everybody knows, we have to have a fixed heating option in the main living area. So of the 5 that are there, all of them are actually compliant. Even the one with the wood burning stove is actually compliant. So the only one that would be questionable is the one up the top in the middle, because is that one actually secured to the wall? It has to be secured, as we all know. It can't be a portable heater. It actually does have to be fixed. Doesn't it need a rating? A rating for what, Megan? Like an efficiency rating, you mean? Mm-hmm. Thank you for picking that up. I appreciate it. Yes, it does need a rating. And we're actually going to talk about the changes that the government is trying to bring in a little bit further along around ratings around heating as well. So I'll pick that one up a little bit later as I go. Structurally sound. Now, this one I think is probably the most contentious one across all of the minimum standards. Effectively, we are not builders, so we are not expected to know if a property is structurally sound. All we can do is look for indicators that perhaps it is not structurally sound. And if we do see those indicators, that's when we then want to notify the owner and advise them that they should get someone professional to come out and have a look at this. In a previous one of these presentations, I had someone ask me whether if they arranged for a tradesperson to come out and they said that the property was structurally sound, and then later on it was discovered that it wasn't, does that absolve the agent or could it come back on the agent? If you had a registered builder that went out and looked at the property and said, no, it's fine, it's structurally sound, and then something happened later on, you could by all means go back and say, well, hold on 1 minute, we have discharged our professional responsibility because we have advised you to get someone else professional to go and check this out and give you their advice. So would it absolve you 100%? The sad reality of the legal system is that anyone can actually pursue their agent if they feel that they have a loss or something like that. That's just their legal right. They also love to come after us because we're the ones who have the professional indemnity insurance. But as long as you have discharged your professional responsibility by saying we have noticed an issue and therefore we are advising you to go and get somebody who actually knows about this stuff to advise you, I would think that you should be pretty solid in your argument. Things to look for out at the properties are obviously substantial cracks in walls, damp, holes in ceilings that mean that it's no longer waterproof. You've got rot in some of the in the stumps or any of the areas that you can actually see, weatherboards, etc. And also, if you're looking at railings, if there's missing railings, that means that it is an actual fall hazard, then that is something that you would want to note for your client and urge them to get that fixed up as soon as possible. Then we've got mold and dampness. Now, the mold and dampness, it is all rooms must be free from mold and dampness that is caused by or related to the building structure. Now, I know in a lot of cases we do see mold coming round at this time of year because the tenants are closing their blinds, and because it's warmer inside than it is outside, they're getting a little bit of condensation on the inside of the windows. That's not actually a fault caused by the building structure. That's just a weather event. It's something that always happens at this time of year. So just encourage your tenants, if they do get in contact with you and say, oh, there's mold coming, et cetera, just give them give them some advice just to wipe that down in the morning, and then they're not going to have a problem. If they let it go, that's when they are actually going to have a problem. And because they're letting it go, that's not related to the building structure. Mold and dampness that comes out because there's absolutely zero ventilation. You've got a leak in a roof, you've got water running down the inside of a wall or something like that, and that's causing excessive mold or dampness to come through. That's when you've actually got a problem. Electrical safety, I think we are also able now to look at a switchboard and go, yes, that's compliant. No, it's not. This is just an example of a compliant switchboard. I would say you're probably not going to see very many of them anymore that are not compliant in your rental properties. You might with some of the newer ones that come on, newer listings, not newer properties. If you list a property that is perhaps a bit older, it may not have a compliant switchboard, but this is what one looks like, and there are plenty of companies out there that can help you with the rectification of those at the moment as well. There's quite a few of them. Laundry facilities, reasonable supply of hot and cold water. So again, 50 litres of hot water per day. This is if there is a laundry within the property. There's actually still a few older ones. I actually managed one that didn't have any hot water to the laundry. It was only cold water. So we actually had to install a specific hot water service for that laundry because it was going to cost way too much for us to arrange to pipe from the existing hot water service around. So the owners actually had to buy themselves one of those little instantaneous units and have that installed purely for the tenants and purely for that room. And when I went to do a routine inspection not long ago, can I tell you, they're quite happy washing in cold water, but the owners had to do it to comply with minimum standards. Then we've got ventilation. Ventilation is a fairly straightforward one. It's just making sure that there is airflow through the property and that there is an adequate means of ventilation with outdoor air. So if you do have any rooms that are completely closed off and they do not have any windows or perhaps a skylight that you can open up or something like that, that's something that is not going to be compliant under minimum standards. If the owners have sealed up the window for some reason in that particular room, they are going to have to arrange to open it up or replace it or whatever to make sure that there is a reasonable amount of airflow. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the new stuff that came in, which, like I said, will not take us long because there is not a lot. So the new addition to the minimum standards that is actually a requirement now, and we have to do as of the 1st of December 2025, is the blind cord cleats or cord guides. Now, I've noted down there that that's actually been a minimum standard in New South Wales since 2020. So effectively what it is to stop any blind cords that are very long and they loop down onto the floor, and they could create a choking hazard for a child. So what we now need to do is make sure that there is something that catches those blind cords and stops them from actually pulling onto the floor. A lot of the newer types of blinds just have those, the ones that you pull down or pull up, so they're not going to create a problem for you at all. When you are having blinds replaced in the future, perhaps look at the possibility of getting something like that has that type pulley type system rather than the ones that you just pull up and pull down. The ones that you pull up and pull down, you can either provide the actual cleats so it can be wrapped around it, or you can have them cut down so it is reduced quite significantly, the amount that will pull on the floor, and then provide the actual wrap around as well. Okay, so on March 5th, the government actually announced the new changes that are going to come through. So we're just going to talk a little bit about those now. So again, another QR code for you there, which is the Consumer and Planning Legislation Amendment Act 2025. There's a mouthful. So that is where you are going to find all the changes that are actually coming through now. And when I say now, it's basically now until the 25th of November, if not before. So these could drop effectively at any time. So the best thing to do is for us to be prepared for them now. And the reality is we've been through this before. So we survived it last time. And if anything, we're going to do it better this time because we know what's coming and we know how to do it. This is not new. Property management now is very much about just rolling with the changes and making sure that we're making the best of them. So the ones that have come through that we know about right now are prescribed rental applications forms, which are limiting the amount of information that you can get on employment, financial information, or identity information. This is actually coming through all of the states right now. It's already in South Australia. It's already in Queensland. They're just bringing it in New South Wales. So if anything, Victoria is perhaps a little bit late in this coming through. But the good part about that, I think, is that the online application services are already sorting this out. So we are in the nice position of coming in and not having to ask for these things to be done because they're already been organised. Not like we are with the minimum standards and our compliance and things. They are not necessarily being responded to as quickly by the software providers, simply because right now they're only in Victoria, and so they're worried about things that are affecting their clients in other states collectively, rather than necessarily worrying about the compliance in Victoria. They are responding to it a little bit more now, but I kind of feel like they're a little bit late to the party. But in respect of prescribed rental applications, will there be a recording for us? Michelle, will there be a recording? Yes, there will. Thank you, O'Brien Sydenham. So employment history, this hasn't been fleshed out fully yet. So the employment history, what I can tell you in South Australia, and please don't panic because I don't think they're going to go this far. Well, I certainly hope they won't. In South Australia, you cannot ask someone where they work. So they just have to tell you that they have got a job. They have to provide their payslips, but they can actually redact the information on the payslip that shows where they work. So that's extreme to me. So I'm certainly hoping that it is nothing too far as that goes. Financial information, I don't think this is going to differ greatly from the information that we have right now as far as redacted statements, unless they take away the ability for us to have the renter offer us a bank statement as being evidence of their information. I know, O'Brien Real Estate Blackburn, I know, it is crazy. And identity information, again, in some of the states, and I'll probably just refer to them because that's where this stuff is already. Some of the other states, people can, or tenants, prospective tenants can provide you, either they can come into your office and show you their ID. They could probably even do that in like a FaceTime. They can show you their ID. If you do get a copy of their ID, you're actually not allowed to keep it. You have to get rid of it under privacy. So again, interesting stuff. A little while ago, To Apply, I don't know how many agencies are using To Apply. They had an option on their application that renters could load their personal information, their ID, into an external company called Green ID. Green ID would verify their ID and you would not get a copy of their ID, but you would get something that says, yes, Sophie Lyon is Sophie Lyon. We confirm that all of her identity documents are valid and they are correct. So that, I always thought that saved us under privacy and it was a good thing. But there was a whole lot of pushback from renters because they didn't think that they should have to pay to have this particular facility, even though it was something completely separate and was protecting their own ID. Backlash about that, which I thought was kind of interesting. So, oops, I think my speaker's just gone off, but that's okay. Can you still hear me okay? Okay, wonderful. We can't charge for applications. Now, that's really logical. Okay, hold on, I've got a couple of questions. How do we try to protect our for fraud? Can we ask for third party identifying the ID? Okay, right at the moment, like I said, it hasn't been finalised. I'm just talking about what has happened with some of the other states. So do we have to remove the ID immediately or within what time frame? Again, hasn't been clarified right at the moment. In New South Wales, you're not allowed to retain it. So you can't keep it at all once you, if you did not proceed with that application, that much I know, you have to get rid of that. You also have to get rid of the information after someone moves out. So there's a time frame for getting rid of it after someone moves out of a property, or if they applied for the property, were accepted and didn't proceed. So there's a few different layers as to what happens in the other states. If I had to make a guess, I'd probably say that you should be able to retain the information of the approved renter for a period of because you may well need that for something like if you needed to make some kind of legal application or something along those lines, or you had the police come knocking on your door and want the ID. So there's a couple of, as I say, there's a couple of different layers to these things. So it's a question mark. Don't panic until we know, and even then, don't panic. It'll be something that we're all going to have to do at the same time. With a bit of luck, we'll know a bit more about this by June, and we can actually go through it in our workshop. We can't charge for applications. Now, I don't know of anybody who charges for applications from an office perspective. I'm not even really aware of any third-party programs that were charging tenants for applications. I think this is a bit of a hangover maybe from some of the other states, or there were some people who were being a bit opportunistic. I'm not really sure why this one came in Vic, but it's absolutely there. So again, I don't think it's going to change our worlds greatly. We can't accept offers of a higher rent than advertised or payment in advance. And that is regardless of whether we've asked for it or someone has offered it. We certainly know within the market recently, because it was so hot and there were so many people competing for different properties, that they were offering $50 a week, $70 a week more, or offering to pay 6 months rent in advance or 12 months rent in advance. The government logic for this one is that people were being disadvantaged. People who could actually be really good tenants were being disadvantaged because people who had perhaps more financial ability were coming in over the top of them and offering more rent or to pay massively in advance. I was never actually really clear why people thought paying rent a long way in advance was a good thing. If anything, it makes our lives more difficult. So I can't say I've ever been a great fan of it. But yeah, so if you advertise a property at $600 a week, it's $600 a week, and someone can't come in and offer to pay you $625, $615, anything like that. The price is the price from here on out. Also, rent increases now require 90 days. So it's an opportunity to get in now and start updating your internal processes for when this one comes in. And the tenants also have an easier road to complain to Consumer Affairs about excessive rent. Again, this is off the back of the really big rent increases we saw come through post-COVID. But the disappointing part about that is that was basically just bringing us all back to where we were before COVID. Everything dropped off so massively over COVID that, of course, we were trying to claw these things back. Also, such a massive financial impost on the clients because they were suddenly being hit with higher rates, higher land tax, the minimum standards, the compliance, all these things that effectively have now driven an awful lot of our owners out of the rental market. And and they're not necessarily coming back in, they're going to other states to invest rather than investing in Victoria. So the government effectively have created a really big problem because they have driven so many investors out. But let's not get into a political conversation about this. We can just kind of continue on, I think. Then we've got changes to notices to vacate. And our notices to vacate now also require a 90-day minimum amount. Now, 90-day minimum, you have always been able to give more than your 60 days. So if you did want to give your renter 120 days, 100 days, 95 days, anything like that, you can always do that. You just can't give them less. So minimum 90 days going forward now. And that's if the property is to be sold, demolition, repairs and renovation, owner to occupy, or the property be used for something other than rentals. And you're hiding behind chat. I just need to move this because I can't see it. Anyway, property be used for whatever that last one is because I can't actually see it. And our lovely 91ZZD and 91ZZDA have been repealed. So there is no more end of fixed term notices. Now, again, this is no surprise. Governments across Australia have been pulling these out wherever you go. So this was always coming and we knew that the government wanted to get rid of this one. One of the main drivers of this as well is because there's so many generational renters now. There are people who are going to go through their entire life and never actually own a property. We've always seen them. I think the longer that we've been in property management, those of us who've been in, for an extended period of time, you've seen these people, they move into the property, they raise their kids there, they live there for a really long time. This is now becoming more and more normalised. And when you see this overseas as well, over in America, in Europe, it is absolutely incredibly normal never to own a property, to rent your entire lives, and also for people within families to move in and out of properties, but keep it in the same family for, decades. So that's what the government is trying to achieve, this longevity of renting, which for our investors, it's actually a really good thing. It's a good thing to have a long-term renter. I've always been fascinated that people never really grabbed hold, or renters never really grabbed hold of the 5-year, more than 5-year tenancy agreement. I've never understood that. If you wanted to be in the property for a long period of time because you wanted your kids to go to school in the area or something. So I think it's very much a cultural thing. That renters just think, okay, I want a 1-year lease, sometimes 18 months, sometimes 2 years, but they're still of the mindset that they don't want to lock themselves in for 5 years plus. I think these will start to become a little bit more normalised now. But I think as agents, we need to look at what the implication is of these longer term renters in respect of our letting fees and our lease renewal fees. So that's a cultural shift we ourselves are going to have to make if we do start seeing more of these long-term renters. Where can we start to make up the fees that we're now not getting because we're not getting the turnover of properties? So maybe that's something for our workshop in June, to kind of research that and spend a bit of time thinking about what we can do to keep the continuity of the income into the organisation. Okay, got a question from O'Brien in Blackburn. If you issue a 90-day end of fixed term and the date falls after the new changes, assuming it will stand, yes. So if you issued a 90-day today, a 120-day today, and they made the changes that were going to come in on the 1st of June, for argument's sake, they have already said that it would continue on, and that you would be able to still proceed with that particular notice. What I would say to you, though, is if the renters decide that they don't want to move out and they want to challenge it, I think we're going to have a really, really hard time getting these through at VCAT now, because it's obviously going to be seen that your owners are trying a last-ditch effort to get rid of a troublesome tenant, or something along those lines. So I just think that we are really going to struggle to be able to get these particular notices through now. Even though we still can do it legally, I think we'll get a bit of pushback from good old VCAT. Okay, so some of the other things that are still coming through as well is properties must meet minimum standards before being advertised or offered for lease. So even if the owner knew somebody and they were like, oh yeah, my friend is going to move into the property, we still need to make sure the minimum standards are done, even though we're not advertising that property. It's certainly been something that agents have been doing until now, as far as advertising the property and getting all of the minimum standards work done before the tenant actually moved in, which is perfectly fine to be able to do that. But what the legislation is now saying is before you even put those photos up, before you lodge it onto realestate.com or wherever it is that you are going to advertise that property, even if it's sticking a photo in the front window of your real estate agency, this is how old I am. Yes, we did used to do that. You will still have to make sure that it meets minimum standards. What if they are a good renter and displays good hygiene? Can the renter still request to stay? Okay. It's not about the renters staying. It's about having a property vacant. So before you start a new tenancy, you have to make sure that the property meets minimum standards. So that's what it's trying to capture. Either whether you're advertising in the stock standard normal way, or whether you have a vacant property that you haven't advertised, maybe you even find somebody on your database. You will still need to make sure that the property meets minimum standards before you push out to those people in your database. All properties have got to have smoke alarms regardless of the date the tenancy commenced. Those of us who've got properties that have been sitting around for a while, as in the tenants have been there for an extended period, you would remember that there was a period there that if the tenancy commenced before the minimum standards came in, that technically you actually didn't need to comply. Again, weird. Why would you do that? This is to cover that loophole. So every property has to have a smoke alarm. Why you wouldn't have had one in the first place, I have no idea, but clearly there are properties that didn't have them. And then lastly, as far as the changes that have come in that they have announced, is mandatory CPD for property managers. So continuous professional development. Again, it's something that is very common in the other states. If you are a member of the REIV, you would be very aware of continuous professional development. If you're not, basically all it is just keeping up to date with all of the changes that are made, all the legislation, making sure that you do training within your own organisations. All of this now, though, has to be recorded. So you will need to have some kind of process within your organisation that if you send your property managers off to an O'Brien training session, or you send them to something at the REIV, I think, AREC and ARPM and all of those will have a certain number of points that will count towards your CPD, but you will need a recording system. In New South Wales, it is part of their licensing requirements that the principal of an organisation has to keep track of everybody's CPD. So this is just making sure, again, from the government's perspective, that we as property managers are being trained. And I know in a lot of organisations that's something that property managers just didn't get enough of, especially if they were sales-based principals and perhaps they were the only property manager there. They didn't get an opportunity to go out and do training because they had to be there running the portfolio. Now it is something that you have to have time off to do because it is a requirement under the legislation. So I, for one, think this is actually a good thing. Okay, so there's some minimum standards updates which are still to come. Now, these were all detailed in the housing, in the Victorian Housing Statement, which actually was released back in 2023. And these are the things that the government want to come in. So fixed cooling systems, I know we've all heard about that one, that there is a big push for properties to have air conditioners. This will be interesting with a lot of the older properties or a lot of properties that were just not built to fit. So we're going to have to go back and retrofit, excuse me, a lot of those air conditioners in properties. Okay. Is it the PM or the office responsibility to track? Oh, you're talking about the CPD. That hasn't been released as yet, actually, whose responsibility it is. I would probably suggest that it's a good thing to do on both sides of the ledger. So the property manager gets their information and maybe takes that to the principal or your office manager, your general manager, whatever it might be, and it's collectively recorded within the organisation as well. That to me just makes sense. And if you've already got the information there as a property manager, handing it over or lodging it somewhere within your company just seems to make sense as well. Ceiling insulation. Now, this one I've got to say I'm not a massive fan of, mainly because those of us who've been around for a while would remember back in, I think it was about 1991, we had the pink bats situation. So the government thought it was a great idea to give, what's that word? Not compensation, but to give to reimburse people, I've lost my word completely, if they went down the path of actually getting insulation installed in their properties. So what happened is pretty much overnight, a whole lot of people decided that they would create insulation companies because all they had to do was go and buy a whole lot of pink bats, get up in your ceiling, whack them down, walk away, and they got paid for it. And they also got paid a percentage of that by the government. Where it went horribly wrong is that people were climbing around in ceiling cavities and they were basically there was about 4 people who were electrocuted because they didn't know what they were looking for. As far as they were concerned, it should be fine to be, getting around in a ceiling cavity. And unfortunately, the wiring that was in the ceiling clearly was not compliant. And so these people unfortunately lost their lives. So it does make me a little bit, uncomfortable around this because I feel like maybe it will happen again as far as opportunistic people just creating insulation companies overnight. But we'll just have to wait and see how this actually does roll out. One of the things with the insulation, though, is it's not required in garages or sheds. Now, I think that's kind of an important thing to be aware of because if you do get people who do a quote and they want to put insulation right across the whole of the adjoining garage or something like that, if we know that that's not what is required, then we'll be saving a little bit of money for the owner rather than just accepting that quote and rolling it out and not actually. And so we're providing insulation somewhere where it actually isn't needed. Draft proofing. So there's 4 levels of draft proofing being considered right at the moment. So Price Waterhouse did a massive review of these things, and the 4 levels are quite phenomenal. If you like reading this kind of stuff, look it up. So the basic level is just making sure that there's no draft coming in under a door or around windows or things like that. Pretty basic and straightforward. The comprehensive level actually involves someone standing outside the property with an air blower, like an industrial, the ones that the council uses to clear after they've been around and they've mowed lawns and things. So they're fairly hefty bits of machinery. They are actually what you need to use to make sure from a comprehensive level, they're what is being required to actually stand at the door and blow that amount of air in to see if there are any gaps around windows or doors. So it is extreme. I'm hoping that it will fall nowhere near that, but somewhere back towards the basic level, and because otherwise I think a lot of our owners are just going to be coming up for yet even more outlay, just to prevent a small amount of air coming in around windows and doors and things, especially in older properties. I think we all know that there is always some degree of a draft in those properties. With your draft proofing as well, you want to be aware if you've got open chimneys that are not being used anymore, those will need to be sealed up. And they'll probably need to be sealed up not just at the very top, but also right down the bottom as well, to prevent any hot air actually going up in the ceiling and into the chimney and just kind of floating around in there. And therefore, it's costing people a lot more to actually heat their homes. So lots of things to think about. Hot water systems, so energy efficiency. Now, this is obviously something that the government has been talking about for a long time, around wanting to make sure that any replacement of hot water services, removing gas from properties and things, wanting to check and enforce effectively that energy efficiency is coming through when properties are being upgraded or when we're replacing these things. So your good old hot water service, your good old Ream hot water service that I think we've all been quite comfortable installing and removing from properties because they get turned over quite quickly. This is an opportunity for you to show your owner your level of professionalism next time you're out doing a routine inspection, to note where the hot water service is, what type of hot water service it is, and start having the conversation with the owner around, okay, if we need to replace your hot water service, once this legislation comes in, we may be in a position that what we're going to have to do is replace it with an energy efficient system, which might mean that it has to be an electric system. So we're going to have to do a little bit of changing around the wiring and the positioning of the hot water service, which also might mean that we need some additional plumbing done. So this, again, good old government telling our owners that this is what they're going to have to outlay. Have these conversations with your clients early, so it isn't one of those things where you have to ring them on a Saturday morning and go, hi, this has just happened, this is what we need to comply with, we need to do it immediately, and that is going to cost you a whole lot of money that you really weren't even prepared for. The other benefit is going to be that you, as the professional, you will know what steps you need to take in the event that the hot water service does decide to give up the ghost, and you'll be able to really easily and confidently pull that plan out of your history, or all your documentation. Pull it straight out, get in contact with your electrician and your plumber, say, right, here we go, this is what we need to do. Here's the quote that you provided me, or here's the scope that you provided. I need you to cost this up for me now, and I need a time frame. At least if you have that going, it's going to be a lot more of a quicker turnaround, and we therefore won't have the impact of the tenants trying to claim compensation because you are trying to get a energy efficient hot water service installed. So you can see, again, I keep talking about layers of these things. We can just look at them and say, okay, that's what it is, and we'll worry about it later. Or we can plan for these things now and make sure that we've got these fantastic processes in place. And again, these are the things that we'll be talking about in June. Shower heads, we talked a little while ago about WELS 3 ratings. Now we're going to have WELS 4 ratings. All that means is it's a difference in the flow rate. And again, when we're going to have to install those, whether it's just at the point where something needs to be replaced, or whether we're going to have to go through and replace every single shower head in every single property, still remains to be seen. But that's definitely one of the things that the government is talking about. Energy efficient heaters. Now, this is also one of those things that is yet to be revealed as to exactly what that means, and also where they're going to have to be. So we've only recently gone through the process of having to install heaters in properties that didn't have them before. But we also need to make sure that that they are now going to have to meet a different level of energy efficiency when we're replacing them. So it's, again, more layers. And one of the last things that the government has been talking about for quite a long time is around the portable bond scheme. So this is quite interesting because it still hasn't been completely clarified as to how this is going to work. And again, other states are utilising this, but they still haven't clarified it. So if you haven't heard about it previously, what the government's trying to do is allow a tenant to move out of a property and have their bond transferred from property A to property B. So it just stays at the RTBA. So you don't then have to worry about refunding and paying, etc. The documentation should allow the bond to just sail through from property A to property B. Where the complication comes in, of course, is that the bond might be different. So there is going to be a top-up process. But also you don't know what is going to be attempted to be held by the previous agent. And I think this is where it starts to get a little bit complicated, I think, because you might have leased the property and you're waiting for this bond to get paid. You're expecting that the bond is going to just sail through without a problem. And then you find out that there is that the bond is being contested. And so where does that bond then come from? One of the things we do have in Victoria is that if a tenant fails to pay a bond, you can give them a 14-day notice to vacate. I think that will stay, and it will probably be adjusted a little bit, that if the tenant either fails to pay a bond or fails to pay the balance of a bond, a portable bond transfer, that you'll be able to make an application to VCAT or perhaps actually again apply for vacant possession of the property. The reason that the government did this is because they realised that it was an impost on people having money sitting somewhere, that they needed to go and find the equivalent amount of money to move into a different property. And then this original bond came back to them in full, because about 90% of bonds have nothing claimed out of them. So it's actually a really high number that could quite easily participate in this portable bond scheme. And that also then, it's perhaps a little bit less work for us to do as property managers, because all we've got to do is sign a form and have it move from property A to property B. But there is just that little bit of uncertainty in there. And I think that might even be a question now. I know on some of the online application processes that we get, where we go through and we tick all the boxes, used to be a conversation a long time ago, and now they're all electronic. It does actually say, has the bond been claimed, or do you expect to give them a full bond refund? I think up until now, we've all just responded to that question with, well, how would I know the tenant actually hasn't moved out of the property? I think going forward, what we are going to have to do is give some consideration to that and think, okay, the last time I went to the property, it was in pretty good condition. The tenants have always been great. We've never had an issue with them. So on a scale of, 1 to 10, how likely is it that they're going to get their bond back in full? It's probably a 9. Or if they've been disastrous tenants, we've always had problems, the property has never been cleaned, they've never looked after the garden, etc., maybe they're a 4 or a 5. And then we as property managers can make judgments on that around the action that we then take, or that we'll be able to take under the portable bond scheme. So I hope that clarifies as much as I can clarify anything with all these things. So this is the Victorian Housing Statement. Again, you've got a little bit of QR code there. Now, this is something that it's just a bit of an explanation. If you wanted to know where I got that information that I was just talking about from, it is all detailed in the Victorian Housing Statement. So if you just wanted to read it, it's there for you. Again, you can tell that I love reading all this stuff because I'm giving you QR codes to pretty much everything. Okay. So now we're coming to communicating out to our renters and our residential rental providers. Now, this I think is one of the strongest bits of pushback you can give to a client who perhaps is not agreeing to comply with the rental minimum standards. Now, 60 penalty units, if you were to get your client, excuse me, not you, if your client was to get stung and the renter actually made an application, thank you very much for letting me know. I will get that sorted out. I don't know why that's happened, but I love that you tried to scan it, O'Brien Clark. Thank you very much for that. I'll get it fixed for you. So 60 penalty units in the case of a natural person, or if you've got an owner's corporation who is refusing to do certain things and they get stung, 300 penalty units is a massive amount of money. So you just want to be able to push this through to your clients and say, look, this is not me saying that you're going to get in huge amounts of trouble. This is actually you refusing to do it. And this is the government telling you what they are going to put on you in the event that you attempt to lease your property out without meeting minimum standards. You would think by this point in the presentation, I would be able to speak. Now, hopefully this one works because this is the rental non-compliance list. So this is where VCAT and CAV actually register that these items are, these particular breaches, having to pay compensation, refraining from committing a breach, etc. If you have an order made under Part 5 of the Residential Tenancies Act at VCAT, you are going on this list. Now, the other part of it, if you are on this list as an owner, if you as an agent are representing this owner, you're on the list as well. So there hadn't actually been anyone put on the list since December. When I had a look this morning, there was 2 more that were put on in February of 2025. So this is being used. And this is something that it's probably just going to continue to exacerbate. But what it also means is that your owner's details are there, the property address is there. So have a try at Googling it. I've got to say, I haven't done it. But if you Google a property address, it's very possible that it's going to come up with the fact that the owner was put onto the non-compliance list. And that in itself is going to make it difficult for you as a property manager to actually lease that property out, or you'll get pushback from the renters because they've actually seen this. The best thing that we can suggest, obviously, with communicating with your residential rental providers is getting in contact with them early. So we're demonstrating that we are ahead of this legislation and we understand how it's going to impact them. And we also have a plan as to how to work with them and for them in making all of this as flexible as it can possibly be, and to allow them not to get stung with things overnight as we did back in 2021. We are preparing them for the inevitable because the government has already said that they have more things planned. They were the things that I mentioned that were in the Victorian Housing Statement. And considering the government is in until November of 2026, they are not going to stop in bringing these things through. And once they're through, they're obviously really difficult to untangle and undo. And I don't think that that any government, if they did change governments over, I really don't think they're even going to bother trying to undo some of these things. They've got bigger fish to fry than worry about whether an owner has to put in an air conditioner or not. And they probably don't necessarily think about the financial impact that that will make on a lot of our clients if it does actually happen. And it gives you time to get your unhappy clients on side as well. So you have the time to have the conversations with them. You have the time to explain the impact of these things. If you have an opportunity, I would recommend either, you can do an EDM out to your client. And, we've got a couple of things there, but the other thing that you could do is do some Q&A, like little videos and things. Pop them up onto YouTube and then you can send them out to your clients as being a bit of information. Pick a different topic and send something out every month to them. Or you could do even a client information night and say to them, okay, won't you come along, or we'll do it, you'll do it on Zoom or on Teams, and you can attend and you can hear us talk about what these changes are going to be and how we are going to enact them for you and how we're going to support you. These changes that are coming through, there are opportunities as well for you to talk to your electricians, your plumbers, and try and get some kind of a realistic idea of what the cost of some of these changes are going to be. Again, so you're supporting your clients with saying to them, you know what, you're going to have to put some money away because when this comes in, we're going to have maybe a year or 18 months in order to get your air conditioner installed. The reality is, if the air conditioners are probably going to come through, and I'd say they probably will, start talking to your clients now and maybe start installing them now. Because as soon as it becomes legislation, you know what's going to happen to the cost of air conditioners, don't you? It's going to go straight up. And the other side of it is for you as property managers, just remember that you didn't make these changes. The government is bringing them in. They have done it many times before. So this is just you having to provide information that is being given to you by the government to your clients. That's part of our role. And it's our responsibility to make sure that they are fully informed and they understand what it is that they have to do. You are going to get pushback from some of the clients. This is just going to happen. So the earlier we can get to them and the more comfort that we can give them with these kind of changes and the new legislation that's coming through, the better the outcome is going to be for you. So there's a really cool thing, which is situation multiplied by reaction equals outcome. Now, the situation might be that a client gets some information from you and not you personally, but they might get it from the government, or it might be an O'Brien mail out that goes out and explains to the client, okay, so here are the changes that come through. So that situation may mean that they then pick up the phone and just want to vent to you as the property manager as to why do they have to do these things, and this is terrible and it shouldn't have to be done and they don't want to do it and this is how much it's going to cost them and so on and so forth, and the impact of these changes on them financially. What you then have the opportunity to do is choose your reaction. So you cannot change your immediate response. Your immediate response is going to be, oh, wait a second, I'm angry, I'm confused, I'm upset by the way this person is talking to me. You can't change that because that's just a physiological thing. But you can change the way that you react to the client. So you can basically go back to them and say, okay, I understand this, let's talk it through. People come from an emotional state and you have the opportunity to bring them down into a rational state. If you do that, then you have an opportunity to influence the outcome. You can never change the outcome, and you can never own the outcome because you are not solely responsible for the outcome. But you can talk your client down off the ledge and have a rational conversation with them, which means that the outcome means that they might walk away thinking, okay, I'm feeling much better about this. I'm feeling a lot calmer about this. I understand what the process is and I understand where we're all going with it. So that's where you can influence the outcome so it ends up being something favourable rather than something that it just blows up into all kinds of a mess because your response is to bite back at a client. The majority of property managers won't do that, but I completely understand that if you've had 4 or 5 of these calls in one day, you might get to the point where it's just like, okay, I've had enough. But we always have the opportunity to control the way that we are reacting and talking to the clients. So I hope all of that has been very helpful. Now we've got a little bit of time still for questions if we have any. Like I said, if you're going to throw any curly ones at me and I can't answer them straight away, I will actually get back to you. And so if there's any questions there, please fire them into the chat. Michelle, was there anything specifically that you wanted me to tackle that I haven't yet?
No, I don't think so. I think everything's from my perspective is being covered off, but I guess obviously if any of the PMs have got any questions for Soph. The slide deck, this has been recorded today, so this will be dropped into the ORAP and then onto dashboard once we edit it up. So that'll be in the next couple of days. Here you go, Soph. There's some questions.
There's a few there. I did just want to say as well, with Real Plus, we have got a couple of cheat sheets that I'm more than happy to provide for you as well. So that basically just details the existing minimum standards, pretty much everything we've gone through today, and a bit of an internal checklist for your organisations as to things that you can put into place. So more than happy to send that through for you, Michelle, and you can send that out to the team, or you can brand it up as O'Brien if you prefer to.
Oh no, we can send that out to all the PMs.
Okay, awesome. Very easy. Okay, do kitchens require ovens or just stovetops? Under the legislation, you're only required a 2-burner stovetop. That is a requirement. If you do have an oven, then the oven must be in working order. So you don't actually need an upright oven or an actual oven at all. But, you know, you kind of think that you'd want to provide one. I don't know. That's up to you. But the legislation says stovetop. If you're listed on the registry, is that permanent or does it come off once compliant, etc.? I think it sits there. That good question. I think that's a curly one that I'll have to do some research on. I think it actually sits there. I think it's a 3-year time frame that it sits there, but I will confirm that for you, Bryony. So I'll get. Actually, I'll just provide the information of Michelle, and she can send it out to everybody. What the answer is for that one, because I imagine other people are probably interested in it as well. Any other questions?
I'm just going to send out to all PMs now the actual changes that have come through, like the actual list. So I'll send that through to everyone in their inbox in a moment. So they've got that. They can obviously, because Sydenham have asked, if they got something they can provide clients, this would probably be the best document to provide clients because it's not O'Brien branded, it's branded by the government. So
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay. Heather, if a property garage is not structurally sound, is that treated as not compliant under minimum standards? So the minimum standards doesn't actually mention whether it is an internal or an external part of the property. What I would say to you though is whether it's attached to the house or not, and how badly it is not compliant with structurally sound. If the thing is going to fall over, then I would be saying to the clients, maybe we're best to get it demolished. Just closing something like that off and saying to the tenants it's not part of the tenancy, in my experience, what has always happened then is the tenants are very curious about the garage and they start wanting to try and get into it. And then if it crashes down onto somebody's head. So I would probably say that if it's not compliant and it's not structurally sound, then the owner needs to deal with that. And it's just not a good idea to allow something that is not structurally sound, or that you have concerns about it being structurally sound, to continue being part of a property or being accessed by tenants. Because if, as I said, if something happens and it crashes down on their heads or crashes down on their car or something like that, then you know they're certainly going to try and come back on you or the owner for some degree of compensation, and you just don't want to get caught up in that. So I would be advising the owner to get someone to go and have a look at it from a professional capacity to confirm that it is actually structurally sound or not. Just recently not structurally sound due to major roof leak and ceiling falling in. Okay, then that's not structurally sound. If it's not waterproof and it's allowing water to come through, then yeah, I would say it's not structurally sound. So they definitely need to get work done on that to get that back compliant again. Might be able to get it on insurance though, unless it's lack of maintenance, in which case you probably wouldn't be able to. Do we have any other questions?
If anyone does have anything, they can shoot me an email. I can pass it on to Soph and she can reply when she gets a moment. So Thank you very much, Soph, for today.
Pleasure.
Well, that's just a thank you. We appreciate your time, and any questions, send them through. I'll send through the slide deck and additional information as well regarding today's session. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks. Bye.